no pay raise since the crash. About half the American people, after inflation, are living on the same or less than they were when I was president. That's 15 years. That's too long. Yes. And so people ought to be angry. The question is, how do you channel your anger? Now, the Republicans know that when people are emotionally bruised, they need the outlet of blame. And they're great blamers. They have blamed, depending on which one you're listening to, Mexicans, Muslims, the president. Somebody caught a cold in Indonesia yesterday. It's his fault. A lot of them think he was still born there. Don't forget Hillary. Yeah, I'm getting to that. And after years of working with Hillary and praising her to the heavens, she all of a sudden became the embodiment of all evil. Now I want to tell you something. Her best friends from childhood are going from Chicago to Iowa to canvass for her. Yes. Now, in a couple of days, 88 people at their own expense are coming from Arkansas to campaign here for her, and she hadn't lived there in 23 years. Now, so the Republicans can do what they do best. They distract, divide, and demonize. Leave no smear behind. But the people that know her best and have known her all her life, with those people in Arkansas, a lot of whom this is a real financial burden for them to haul all the way up here. They're doing it because they know her, they believe in her, and they know that everything she ever touched, she made better. She's the best change maker running. She's the best qualified person to be president running, to do the whole job. And people in New Hampshire will have a chance to talk to them and ask them why. Ask her why they're here, what they're doing. I get a text from one or the other of them all the time saying, no, we're up to 85. Now we're up to 87. Last night, our former governor and Senator David Pryor, who was the most popular politician in the state, said, we're up to 88. We're moving. Now, why am I telling you this? Because one qualification for a president is knowing how to stand your ground, and another is knowing when to find common ground. We have a Republican Senate and a Republican House. We might win the Senate back. I think we will if you nominate Hillary. I think we'll get the Senate back. But we might have 51 votes or 52, but it'll make a difference. And yes, yeah, I think you will. All right. So there we are. So what are we going to do? It's interesting when I listen to the Republicans demonize her today. They're not dumb, those guys. They know what they're doing. So they're basically saying, would you please not nominate her? Please, we don't want to run against her. Don't do this. And they're smart. They're not all driven by money, but they are all driven by power. That's what they want. And so they put her through all this. They started raising Cain about Benghazi. First report was issued by a nonpartisan professional group that said there were security lapses, but she was not personally responsible. Here are 29 recommendations. Before she left the State Department, she started implementing them. First Republican committee to look into it said, that's right, she didn't do anything wrong, but we got to fix these things. That's essentially what happened when we lost 220-something Marines in Lebanon in 1983. The difference was Tip O'Neill, the then speaker, was a patriot who said, we're not playing politics with these people's lives, and even though we were hit 3 more times, wait a minute, even though we were hit 3 more times, the last time Long after the security measures were supposed to be implemented and hadn't been, the CIA station chief was kidnapped from a diplomatic compound and killed. Still, he allowed no politics. So when the first committee, chaired by a Republican, came out with the obvious truth, what did? They appointed a second one. Second one came up, appointed a third one. Third one said the same thing, appointed a fourth one. Fourth one said the same thing, appointed a fifth one. Sixth one said things, appointed a sixth one. One of them was headed by a man who's now retired, Mike Rogers, Republican from Michigan, the Intelligence Committee. They said, you don't understand. This is about the result, not what really happened. We want a result. So they appointed a special committee who kept her there for 11 hours. And I don't know what you thought. I thought she ate their lunch. But everybody, including a lot of our friends covering this event, treated this whole thing like it was legit, till the Senate, House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy from California, actually committed the unpardonable sin in political theater. He told the truth. It was not a truth that they were unaware of, but they didn't have to talk about it till he said so. He said, well, because Fox News was giving him grief for not repealing health care, and he said, well, you know, what did you do last time? He said, our special Benghazi committee, look what it did to Hillary Clinton's numbers. But she kept on going. Now, all these people who now say she's the devil incarnate or whatever it is they say, blaming her for everything, they liked it fine when she was in the White House with me. 76% of them voted for the Children's Health Insurance Program that she worked with Senator Kennedy for. She worked with my most severe critic in the House, Tom DeLay, to change the adoption laws of this country that increased the adoption of kids from foster care into adoptive homes by 65%. They liked her fine when she was in the Senate, working with President Bush to get the whole $20 billion New York needed to take care of not only the physical losses, but the human losses. All the plastic surgeries that had to be done, all the injuries to the first responders. When Katrina hit, the Senate Republican leader then was Trent Lott of Mississippi. He said that she had done more for the victims of Katrina than any senator of either party outside the affected Gulf Coast states. She went with John McCain with a bunch of reluctant Republicans to look at climate change back when Senator McCain could say that it was real and well to do something about it. And listen to the Eskimos in Point Barrow, Alaska say their way of life was ending because their houses were sinking into the mud. She worked with Senator Lindsey Graham to get National Guardsmen in New Hampshire who were deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq the same health care that regular veterans did who were put in combat zones. It helped millions of people. When she was Secretary of State and she got those Iran sanctions, got Russia and China to go along with them, even I didn't think she could do that. They liked the sanctions. Even the people that didn't like the Iran deal liked the sanctions. And they know it never would have happened without the sanctions. And then the last thing that survives our attempts to have better relations with Russia under Mr. Putin is something called the New START Treaty. It makes nuclear war less likely. It makes this country safer. It required 67 votes in the Senate, and she got them after negotiating the treaty. Oh, I could give you lots of other examples. She took President Bush's best achievement, PEPFAR, which gives our money to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria around the world, and triple the number of lives we are saving simply by buying generic drugs that had been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. We went from no more money out of your pocket, we went from saving 1.7 million to 5.1 million lives a year. Now that's why when she left office, our approval rating as a nation was 20 points higher than it was when she took. She's a walking change maker. All these terrible things they say about her, let me ask you this. Is it possible that a woman could get out of Yale Law School in the early 70s when women were in a minority, and if you graduated from one of those famous law school, you could write your ticket. She went to work for the Children's Defense Fund to find out why African-American kids were being jailed with adults in South Carolina and why private schools were getting a tax break when they were nothing more than instruments to perpetuate segregation. And then when she came to Arkansas, she set up the first legal aid clinic we ever had where the university is. And then she imported a preschool program from Israel, no less, to help parents become their kids' first teacher. Before there was any mandatory kindergarten anywhere in America, before there was any preschool anywhere in America, before there was any standards in child care, she did this. It swept the country. There are now thousands of people over the last 30 years who started school better prepared to learn, who grew up and did better because she did that. She just made something happen. They don't have any idea that she's responsible for their getting into that preschool program. When we had to rewrite the school funding formula in Arkansas, I said, this is a good excuse. We'll raise taxes to equalize funding and raise teacher pay and raise the standards. An expert said they got the worst schools in America. She did the standards, had hearings, they were implemented. Then I came up here to New Hampshire running for president. And I said, one reason you ought to vote for me is education is really important. And 10 years ago, this expert said we had the worst schools in America. And now the same guy said we had one of the two most improved school systems in America. And she did that. She'd never been elected to anything. She is a walking change maker. And so in the Democratic primary, look where we are. We're fighting it out in Iowa. She's got a little lead that I think is solidifying and maybe growing a little bit. We're on a home field disadvantage here. But the real issue is who can win the election, who's prepared to do the job, who can make real change. And I thought the most interesting answers in the debates were when they both agreed on the issues, and they agree on most of these problems that we need to address. And they're both passionate and they're both good. I mean, let's just table that. But the last question was, is there anything we haven't discussed you think we should have? So they called on her first and she said, yeah, I'm really upset about this lead in the water in Flint, Michigan. Yes! And you know, she's worked with families and children all her life. She knows what it's like when these little babies come out and their heads are shrunken and their brains are shrunken, and it's horrible. So what did she do? She got in touch with the mayor, sent somebody on her staff to see him, said, tell me what I can do. And he said, well, they're only giving us 10% of the money we asked for, and we need it all. And the best thing you can do is to get publicity for that. Go on and do an interview. So she did. She said they need it all and explained why. They got it all. Now, when her opponent in the primary, when his turn came to speak, he obviously cared about it too. He was obviously just as outraged. And what he said was the governor should resign. And I don't know, maybe he should, but he's not going to. But the point is, her instinct is always, what can I do? And let me tell you, there'll be some great days for the next president if we elect the right one. There'll be the days when you, one more time, get a jobs program that will give the kind of economy you had when I was president, which will build on what the president has done, but raise incomes and create more jobs that pay above average wages. There'll be a great time when if we do what she wants and build on the Affordable Care Act, when we can say that everybody's insured and we finally got these drug prices down and we've got a hold of the way health care is paid for by getting people to pay for plans and performance, not by the procedure. I hope there'll be some great days in foreign policy more breakthroughs in peace, more victories against terror. But there are all the other days. You got to elect a president who will make the most of all the other days. Because I can tell you one thing, there is never a day when you're in the Oval Office that you can't make something good happen for somebody. If you get up every day and push that rock up the hill, something good can happen for somebody on the worst day. And therefore, I think you ought to vote for the best change maker. And I'll give you an example. Because this is all in the public record. They debated health care. And her opponent said, well, I had this one plan for 20 years. I bagged it, and here right before the debate, here's a new plan. And I won't comment on the specifics of it because it's been well commented on by all kinds of progressive people all over the country who know something about it. So I don't want to get into the details. But here's the practical reality. If you want to make change, it's easier to go. We have 90% of the people insured for the first time in our history. The Republican governors are beginning to cave and accept Medicaid because it's a very good deal for them. And it's very hard to explain why their white working class base, the people that vote for them, are being deprived of the health care that people just next door have. So when that happens, we'll be at about 95%. It's easy to close the next 5%. So the only thing I want you to know is I think, based on my experience, it's a lot easier to go from 90 to 100 than from 0 to 100. Yes. Especially if what you propose to do, like every health care change, depends upon getting 60 votes in the Senate, a Republican Senate, where we didn't have a single vote to spare when we had a Democratic Senate. It passed by just 60 votes. And we couldn't even pass a public option then. So how are we going to get this? And what about the Republican House, where they voted almost 60 times to repeal this? It's a recipe for gridlock, and we can't afford it. You can't wait to put people back to work. We can't wait to get these jobs programs. We can't wait to try to pass equal pay and paid leave and do the things we have to do to grow and diversify the workforce. Look, Hillary thinks we have to do this together. If you want to reduce inequality and increase broadly shared prosperity, you've got to deal with the social issues that are tearing us apart. And you have to deal with the economics. We Democrats believe Black Lives Matter. We're tired of seeing movies of police killings. We like the dreamers. Yeah. We don't want to see Latino and Asian kids sent home. We want them to be able to get their education and contribute to the American economy. We know that the overwhelming majority of Muslims are good, law-abiding Americans, and demonizing them is a really bad move because the battle now is going on over the social media inside the heads of 1 billion people. Yeah. We have no chance to win that battle without the help of Muslim Americans. No chance at all. We are proud of the gains that the LGBT community has made, and we have no intention of turning our back on them. We are not going to allow Social Security to be privatized. We are not going to allow a lot of these things the Republicans want because we got to stay together. But we also know in our gut, no matter who they vote for, that the fact that white working class Americans have their life expectancy going down for the first time in over 100 years is a national travesty. And look, the proximate causes are more or less in order. First, the rampant epidemic of prescription drug and heroin abuse. And as all of you know in New Hampshire, it is sweeping across small town and rural America. I urge you to pick up a copy of the New York Times today. It's got a map of where we were on these problems in 2002 and where we are today. It is chilling. So that's the first cause. The second cause is alcoholism, increased alcoholism. And the third cause is suicide. And she was the first person, Hillary was, to call for more mental health facilities and more treatment. And to be fair, this is an area where we got a chance to make common cause with the Republicans, because these drugs are killing Republicans as well as Democrats like wildfire. Okay, but even though those are the identifiable causes, the truth is that an awful lot of these people are dying of a broken heart because the American dream has been taken from them. And she is determined to give it back to them. And that's why she was the first person to say, look, I support the president's rule on clean air. We got to do something about climate change. We got to quit putting carbon in the air. But these coal miners didn't do anything wrong. All they did was get up and breathe all this stuff for years to turn our lights on and help us fight our wars. And their kids went off and served in the military. They didn't do anything wrong. Why are we not doing more for them to help them begin again? One big part of embracing change is investing in people and places that have been left out and left behind. The other night I was up in Claremont, and the city manager got up and endorsed Hillary. I didn't know they could endorse, but I was glad to have it. And we were in this beautiful renovated factory. And he said, I want to tell you exactly why I'm doing this. We've got to get the show on the road. And I'm just telling you, you can discount what I say, but you've been good to me. You've been good to our family. I trust you. And 3 weeks is an eternity in politics. In New Hampshire, it's an eternity. And that's all I ask you to do. You don't have to say anything bad about anybody. You just say, we can't afford gridlock. She's the best change maker and the only one prepared to do every aspect of the job from day one. We cannot risk losing this moment. And she's shown along the way that she can find common ground, but she proved in those 11 hours she could stand her ground, and you need both in a president. So that's what I want you to tell people. And when all these people haul themselves up here from Arkansas and start going door to door, I want you to ask the doubters whether there's any other person who could get those people to drive that far, many of them with very limited incomes, to come here for a person who hadn't lived in their state for 23 years, but they know her. Not the cardboard cartoon, not the demonized distortion. They know her. I am telling you, and you do too. So be of good cheer. This is always going to be a hot race because people are angry and they need the emotional outlet of someone to blame. And Hillary's opponents blame targets a heck of a lot better than Republicans. Wall Street bankers and some irresponsible billionaires are more responsible by far for what we're going through. But what about the ones that agree with us? I know as you notice this, I have to just say one last little thing. I shouldn't do it probably. But twice in the debate, he kind of gigged me. Said, you know, in the economic determinist world, we had 2 Treasury secretaries from Goldman Sachs, one Democrat and one Republican. Remember that? That was me. Now, and George W. Bush. Now, if you believe that we adopted the same policies with the same consequences for America and the world, I urge you, you're in the wrong headquarters. But if you compare the policies and the results, the only time in 50 years we've had broadly shared prosperity. The only time. Incomes went up across the board. Compared with President Reagan, who was the first trickle-down president, the bottom 20%'s earnings went up 30 times more when I was president. That's policy. They went down under the next 2 Republicans. Next 20% went up more than twice as much. The middle 20%, 70% more increase in incomes. The next 20%, 25% more. 80 to 95%, 10% more. The only people that did better were the top 5%. The incomes of the bottom 20% went up in percentage terms more than the incomes of the top 20% when I was president, and 100 times as many people moved out of poverty.
That's right.
So, if you don't think there's any difference, then you got one choice. If you want to elect a change maker, you need to make Hillary the president. She will do a great job. Thank you.